Hello, everybody. I have been trying to get into the StreamYard thing that I set up. And I've been using StreamYard for my academic writing group, and I think that I've been using it too much because I've already used up like 12 hours. So in the last week. Then after that it's paid. So anyway, we're gonna do it here because I couldn't figure out how StreamYard was gonna work on YouTube. I figured it out on Facebook, but I wanted to do it through the YouTube program, whatever. So we'll do it here. StreamYard is also, like I said, expensive after so many hours. So not too expensive, but like, anyway, I'm okay with the quality. The camera is not like amazing, like the lighting, all that, but it's also dark here. So we're gonna go with it. So hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. I apologize for the delay. And today we are finishing Molière May, and this was really fun. I had a really great time rereading these plays and, talking to you all about them and, having you guys, in some cases, encounter these plays for the first time. We are finishing with Molière's mature play, Le Misanthrope. And actually, as it turns out, the order in which we read the plays was actually quite helpful because Le Misanthrope kind of brings together the themes that we have seen in the earlier plays in this read-along. And I was just thinking about how nice it was that we, started with Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, where, one of the themes, at least in the first scene, is about art and money and about, again, this question of whether people should be flattered because of their status or whether, we should not be so motivated by money. And then when we came to talking about Tartuffe, and then, of course, Don Juan, the theme was hypocrisy. And Don Juan really develops this theme of hypocrisy that's in Tartuffe. And then L'École des Femmes, you have Arnolphe, who is a jealous man, and jealousy is also a theme in Le Misanthrope. So Le Misanthrope really brings together a lot of the different themes that we've been seeing in Molière's plays. So I'm going to just start and kind of talk about what I really like about this play. So our characters, who are our characters? So we have Alceste, who is the misanthrope. The title of the play is Le Misanthrope ou l'ultrabilaire amoureux. Okay, what is ultrabilaire? Ultrabilaire is somebody who has too much bile. This is a reference to the humors. So there was this belief at the time, basically that human emotions were associated with the bile, and that if the bile was black, then the person would be like very cantankerous, basically. And so that is how Alceste, who is our protagonist, is presented. When this play was first performed at the Palais Royal in 1666, Molière played the character of Alceste. It is actually interesting to think about what roles Molière plays. And also, and this I think is really interesting, Célimène is played by his wife. So his actual wife played in his play, which I think is so interesting. So yeah, we have Alceste, who is the misanthrope. He hates flatterers. He is someone who is like super honest, and he says it as it is, and he just hates the culture of the nobility and even the bourgeoisie that encourages lying, flattering, and just not being yourself. He wants to take off the mask. Okay, so he's like the opposite of Don Juan. Like he wants to take off the mask, and he wants everyone to be who they really are. And so he has no fear of just insulting people and telling them that, telling them they're all their faults. So he doesn't like any of this, these social conventions. He's in love with a woman named Célimène, whom he loves because, Célimène is someone who kind of is like the one person in his life, the one human being whom Alceste believes has some value to him, some value just in general, because she's just really lovable. And he doesn't exactly know why he loves her. He says, I don't know why I love her because it doesn't make logical sense. Everyone says, oh, well, Alceste, he's just driven by his passions. So, of course, he's in love with Célimène, but he doesn't really know why. And yeah, she's basically the only person that he can tolerate, because otherwise he hates all of humanity, as he says. And then you have some other characters. You have Philinte, who is Alceste's friend, but unlike Alceste, he doesn't think there's anything wrong with the social conventions. He thinks that, when honesty borders on nastiness, then it's inappropriate. And he doesn't see the problem even of flattering the ego of, some noblemen, because he's like, well, that's just social convention and it doesn't do anyone any harm. So he has no problems doing that. Whereas Alceste has a lot of problems with it. Then we have, Oronte. So Oronte is one of Célimène's suitors, because Célimène actually has a lot of suitors, a lot of men who want to win her love because she is just the most beautiful woman. And Oronte comes to Alceste and asks him to critique, or rather to give his feedback to a poem that he had created. So he writes this sonnet, and the sonnet is just very, in French the word is affecté. It's just like filled with a lot of adjectives and cliches, and in a way Molière is ridiculing contemporary poetry. I've seen comparisons being made to Corneille and Racine, and that their poetry is kind of the model for Oronte's sonnet. But anyway, it is definitely supposed to be, satirical here. And Oronte recites his poem, and Alceste just tears it apart. He's like, this is terrible. And Oronte is just, really taken aback by it. But particularly Alceste's friend Philinte, who is like, Philinte is flattering Oronte as he's like delivering his poem. And the whole time Alceste is whispering to him, stop, this is ridiculous, you should be ashamed of yourself, but Philinte doesn't see anything wrong with that. Whereas Alceste is like, no, I'm going to just tell it to you as it is. And Philinte is like, well, how are you going to be able to live in society? And Alceste actually contemplates leaving, just completely leaving and going into exile, because he just can't tolerate the hypocrisy of the people around him, and he doesn't want to play the game. So like I said, Célimène is courted by it's just several suitors, but Alceste also has a woman who loves him, other than Célimène, and that is Arsinoé. Now, Arsinoé is a prude, or at least, well, so yeah, she's a prude. That's kind of her character, is that she's constantly critical of Célimène because she's, seeing all these men. She's not actually seeing all these men. These men just come to her. And Célimène claims that she is only faithful to Alceste. But Arsinoé says, basically, first, there's a moment where Arsinoé basically meets up with Célimène and then insults her, basically saying, oh, I've been hearing people talk about you, and they've been saying all these things about you. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry, did I offend you? And Célimène's like, no, of course not. I think we should always be honest with what we hear. We should, be very frank about what people are saying about us. And then she goes on to talk about the reputation that Arsinoe has of being a prude, of being somebody who's just always in everyone's business, and and then Arsinoe is really taken aback, and it's just this really fun banter. But afterward, Arsinoe goes up to Alceste and says, I know that Célimène is seeing other men because I have a letter from Célimène that just shows you that she's cheating on you, basically. And what we come to learn is that Célimène actually just writes these letters to all of the men and kind of plays with them. And it doesn't really seem like she's genuinely interested in any of the men. And so in the end, Alceste just leaves. I mean, he basically gives her an ultimatum, and he's like, you need to decide. Either you're with me or you're not. And she's like, oh, I'm young and beautiful. Like, I'm not interested in going with you. And so he goes into exile by himself. But the thing with Alceste is that, even though he's all about being honest and knowing the honest truth, there is the sinister side to his love for honesty and transparency. He's a very jealous man. So in that way, he has certain traits that are like Arnolf's in L'École des Femmes. You have this person who he's so suspicious of everybody. He can't trust anybody. He cannot trust the woman he loves. And so he tries to create this system. He tries to force Célimène to swear that she would never, go off with another man. And, it's just, you see how this jealousy really eats him up. I think that, though, I find that at least in the first couple acts, I find the lines to be the most powerful, when Alceste is talking to his friend Philinte, and Alceste says, he starts to describe all of the hypocrisy at court, and it really hit me as quite insightful. And then Philinte asks, is there anybody that you don't hate? And here is what Alceste says. This is in Act 1. I don't know which scene it is because I'm looking at the English here. But here's what Alceste has to say. There's no exception, and I hate all men, a part because they're wicked and do evil, the rest because they fawn upon the wicked, and fail to feel for them that healthy hatred which vice should always arouse in virtuous hearts. You see the rank injustice of this fawning, shown toward the bare-faced scoundrel I'm at law with. The traitor's face shows plainly through his mask, and everywhere he's known for what he is. His upturned eyes, his honeyed canting voice, impose on none but strangers. All men know that this confounded, low-bred, sneaking scamp has made his way by doing dirty jobs, and that the splendid fortune these have brought him turns merit bitter and makes virtue blush. Whatever shameful names you heap upon him, there's no one to defend his wretched honor. Call him a cheat, a rogue, a cursed rascal, and everyone agrees, none contradicts you. But yet his grinning face is always welcomed. He worms in everywhere. He's greeted, smiled on, and if there is preferment to compete for, intrigue will win it for him from the worthiest. Damnation, it offends me mortally to see how people compromise with vice. Sometimes I'm seized upon by sudden longings to flee from all mankind and live in deserts. And I really love this discourse because, it's all about how there are certain people that everyone hates. And so if you were to talk about this person and like who he really is, everybody would agree with you. They'd be like, yes, of course, this man is terrible. But he somehow is able to kind of remain in office, and people fawn upon him because of what he can give them too. I mean, it's, if he's super corrupt, then he's obviously there's going to be people around him who try to benefit from his corruption. And yet, at the same time, they know that he's a garbage human. And I thought that was just, I really like that passage. That's a passage that I really like. This is a very sophisticated play. I found at times, it's not so much that I found it hard to follow, but I do think that it requires you to have some familiarity with Molière's other plays. So I think it is good that we did this play last. At one point, the characters discuss L'École des Maris, the school for husbands, which we didn't read, and I have never read. But like I said, there's this kind of intertextuality that exists. Let's see. Let me know if you have any passages that you like. Just, share them with me, because I don't want to just be talking at you. Let's see. We can go into the discourse of Célimène. Or actually, before that, we have Oronte. And actually, I'm interested in seeing how they translate Oronte's sonnet, because, let's see, when Oronte comes in, let's see. I'm still looking for it. So Alceste tells Oronte, I have the fault of being more sincere than suits the case. And Oronte says, well, that's of course what I want, thinking that he's going to be praised to the highest heavens. And then Oronte, because you can tell that he's not exactly comfortable with his own poetry, he starts hedging and going, well, okay, look, I just wrote this in 15 minutes, and like it's it's not my best work, and it's just in response to this woman who I'm in love with, and and Alceste is like, we'll see if it's any good. I'm not going to tell you in advance, basically suggesting that Oronte is just looking for praise even before he delivers the poem. And so here is Oronte's poem as translated into English, which I haven't read, so we'll see. Hope, it is true, may bring relief and rock to sleep a while our pain. But Phyllis, what small gain and brief, if nothing follow in its train? You showed me some benevolence, but should have shown me less, or none, nor put yourself to such expense to give me hope and hope alone. If I must wait eternally, fordone by love, to death I'll fly, and end my lost endeavor, then vain your care, my Phyllis fair. Hope and despair are one, I swear, when hope lasts on forever. I must admit that when I read the poem, and maybe this just shows that I don't have a taste for poetry. When I read that, I thought, it's not too bad, is it? But then I guess if Alceste is supposed to represent someone who hates like masks, and he hates people saying what they don't mean or not, he wants somebody to speak plainly, he's going to hate poetry. Like Alceste is going to then intrinsically be that, be someone who opposes poetry, any kind of poetry, because a poet doesn't speak straightforwardly. He doesn't say what he means, and that's what he wants of Oronte. And Oronte is like, so let's see what Alceste says. He says, I was telling him a frigid piece of writing bores to death, and this one weakness is quite enough to damn a man, no matter what sterling qualities he have withal, for men are judged most often by their foibles. And he basically suggests that Oronte is just, someone who loves hearing his own voice, which is an interesting accusation. It does seem that Oronte just generally only wants praise. You also have the suitor Acast, who is he's a marquis who feels that he deserves Célimène's love because he's like just the best he's the best noble, so he of course deserves her. He's constantly singing his own praises. So you do have these people who are really arrogant, but I do feel in some ways that Alceste is also arrogant, that he enjoys being honest and being like 100%, like in some ways there's like this weird lack of like compassion for people, this absolute honesty is just really nasty. It's like, I don't know, I think today the equivalent of that in social media is like the hot take, right? Or spilling the tea. We talk about spilling the tea. And, I think that there's a lot of value in spilling the tea because, well, truth is important and valuable. I do think at times, though, that there is something kind of performative about spilling the tea. And, we see this with Alceste, who takes the opportunity to tell people how he feels, including Célimène, whom he like openly criticizes for her faults. Like he could just keep them to himself. And I don't know, but then again, it kind of goes with this question that I asked last week when we were doing Don Juan. Is hypocrisy or, the wearing of masks somewhat necessary in life? Like, is there, in other words, something about hiding our true feelings or not being 100% that is actually good, that's something that we should be embracing? Because I wouldn't want to have a friend like Alceste. I must be honest. Hello, Clearbridge. It's good to see you or read you. Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about, I'm talking about the Misanthrope, so I'm really interested in hearing what you guys have to say. I guess my question then that I will kind of ask any of you here is dissimulating your true feelings, the act of dissimulating your true feelings, or praising someone who doesn't fully deserve it, or maybe hypocrisy to some degree. Are these values, is there anything positive about these values? Like, because I feel like their negative qualities are somewhat apparent. But is there something that today even is, might make us think there's something good about them? Or should they just be abolished? Like, how do you feel about this idea of wearing masks? Or maybe there's different ways of wearing masks. Like there's the hypocrisy of Tartuffe versus, someone who gives a more gentle critique of someone's poem instead of just ripping it to shreds. Or maybe even Philinte, who pretends that he loves the poem. Like maybe that's not as bad as, being like Tartuffe or Don Juan. And this kind of goes with, BookTube too, because people write books on BookTube, mostly AuthorTube. And, I don't really read BookTuber books, although I have bought a few and I do plan on reading them. But I know for myself, when it comes to reviews, I will only review I would say in general, a self-published book if I liked it. Because I feel like I just couldn't. The hypocrisy can be a good thing, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm interested in knowing, like, give me examples, because a part of me is like thinking, yeah, I think that there is a certain necessity for that in some situations. And I'm not really able to come up with any examples. Perhaps with critique of people's work. If you've got high ideals, you'll always fall short. Yeah, definitely. And also, if you have high ideals, other people will always fall short. And that, I think, is exactly kind of what Molière is getting at. Alceste has insane ideals, And because of that, he hates humanity. He's like, everybody's fake. Everybody is just lying. And then there's a certain arrogance there because, okay, well, then he's human. So that means that he too is hiding and lying. It makes me wonder, like, where is that in Alceste as a character? And I think maybe it's in the fact that that in not holding back a little bit, in not kind of hiding his feelings. It reminds me of all the people fawning over Trump when they know he's a moron, particularly those in his party. Yeah. So what comes to mind when I think about that is actually a fable by La Fontaine. So there's this fable by La Fontaine. It's a bit different in theme. But in the fable, you have this wolf and this lamb, okay? And the wolf and the lamb the lamb is drinking at this river. And the wolf comes up and accuses the lamb of disturbing his water source. And the lamb is like, I'm literally on the other part of the river. Like there's no connection between the waters. I mean, except of course there is, but like there isn't. Okay, I'm not disturbing you. I'm not in your way. And then the wolf's justification becomes even more crazy. It becomes even more obnoxious. He's like, oh, well, you bothered me a couple years ago. I forget exactly what the accusation is, but he basically blames the lamb for doing something before he was even born. And the lamb is like, I wasn't even born yet at the time. And I wrote about this once and I want to like make sure I get this right. Get this right. And so he says, oh, and I know, that's what he says. And I know you said bad things of me last year. That's what the wolf says. And the lamb responds, how could I do that when I wasn't born? Answered the lamb, I am still at my mother's breast. And then the wolf goes, well, if it wasn't you, it was your brother. He goes, I haven't a brother. It was then someone close to you. And the lamb is like, okay, this is ridiculous. And the lamb keeps trying to defend himself. And the wolf gets just exasperated and eats him up. And the moral of the story, and this is kind of what your comment about Trump came to mind. The moral of the story is always the first line. And the line is, la raison du plus fort est toujours la meilleure. The reason of the strongest person is always the best. Now, why? What does this mean that the reason of the strongest man is always the best? A literal translation would be the reason of the strongest person is always the best. And, obviously the wolf's complaint is not reasonable. And the lamb was already at the stream before the wolf arrived, and then the lamb defends himself, and then the wolf, claims that, he insulted him even before he was born. It makes no sense. So obviously the wolf's reason isn't the best because it's reasonable, okay? It's not the best because it's the most logical. It's the best because the wolf has the power to get what he wants. And the lamb doesn't have that power, so no matter what he says, he's going to get eaten anyway. And so, the moral of the message is that the reason of the strongest is the best because the strongest win. They have the power to basically do whatever they want. And, sort of the consequence of that is that, people who then get away with saying and doing the most ludicrous things, right? People who can make the stupidest comments on Twitter and be the president of the United States at the same time and just do absolutely anything, say absolutely anything. Those are the people who have the most power in our society. And I think to me, it's more also of a commentary of like power, of like people being able to say whatever they want without consequence, because they're the ones who are the most powerful. wolf's gonna wolf. Yeah, exactly. Wolf's gonna wolf. And like, that's exactly it. And, you know, nothing the lamb says is going to change that. And I know La Fontaine doesn't seem to be connected, but that is a side, you know, but it is, in a sense, because La Fontaine is believed to have written this fable in response to the trial of Nicolas Fouquet. Now, Nicolas Fouquet was the he was the superintendent of finance under Louis XIV. And he was this ambitious administrator, this extravagant spender, and he built himself this castle of Vaux-le-Vicomte, which became eventually the model for Louis XIV's Versailles. And Louis was so afraid that someone like Fouquet would, you know, might rival him in power. And because Louis XIV was wanting to be, you know, he was the first absolute monarch of France, he decided he decided to imprison Fouquet. So he imprisons Fouquet and he confiscates his castle. And so Fouquet, you know, he might have all the wealth in the world. He might have deserved, I say deserved near quotes, but Fouquet is no angel himself, okay? He was just as, you know, he was also an unjust person. If you're the superintendent of finance for the king, you're definitely corrupt. But it, you know, what La Fontaine is saying is that, you know, nothing that Fouquet says is going to make any difference, because if Louis XIV wants to imprison you, he just will. He will imprison you and confiscate your, you know, and confiscate your property and build Versailles based on your own castle. Like, it's not going to make any difference because, you know, wolf will wolf. And yeah, well, I mean, so you talk about Jesus and and power. Yeah, I mean, I think that the power here that is being talked about in La Fontaine's fable is like the more like brute power, but also like how people are. It also depends on how people view it. I think that if somebody who's a dictator can say any moronic thing and be, you know, and no matter what he says is just going to be okay, or people are just going to ignore it, or people are going to defend it, that means that person has a lot of power in the society. And no, I mean, I think that that's a good example. I think when you think about, so brute strength and power like that is, you know, can get you anything you want. I'm trying to remember how that where this came from. Oh, people fawning over Trump, right? But yeah, so people fawning over someone might do so because they think they will benefit from it. And so, you know, as long as they're benefiting from the person, then, you know, why not? I mean, you know, at the end of the day, they want a powerful person who will defend whatever it is they believe in. And it doesn't matter. I mean, but I do think it's an indictment on the entire society that enables the person in power. Because ultimately, nobody is really a wolf, too. Like, the wolf and the lamb, I mean, that's where the metaphor breaks down. The wolf and the lamb are different species of animals. And the wolf will be a wolf because that's what it is. But humans aren't different species. So there are enablers. Let's see. Clayburgh says, if you're a bad person, it's better that you imitate goodness than fall into your badness, even if it's a bit false. Oh, I think that's an interesting thought. I don't know if, so if you're a bad person, you're probably not going to imitate goodness. But if you are somebody who, like Alceste, is kind of thinking, oh, well, everybody is hypocritical, everybody's kind of lying, he's only thinking about the negative side of that. Like, he's thinking, oh, well, you know, he's thinking about it in terms of like the court life. In court life, the hypocrisy is like very, you know, congratulatory and like ignorant of everything that's going on in the world and really problematic. But trying to be a good person is in a way a kind of, you know, trying to, there's a certain way of when you behave in certain ways, you know, the fake it till you make it. It can come from a good place, I think. But it also, you know, it depends on how you criticize people if you're going to be honest. Because I think the problem with Alceste is that not only does he want to be honest, but he doesn't hide anything. Like, he doesn't keep anything back. He's like, I'm just gonna just lay it all out there. I'm gonna tell you everything that's in my mind. And somehow that's honesty. But it's like, I don't think that is. I think that sometimes holding things back is also is just fine. I mean, otherwise everybody would be able to read our thoughts, and I can't imagine that. I cannot imagine that. Let's see other examples of, and Alceste himself is he thinks he's super righteous, but we see that he is really jealous. That he wants to control the woman he's with, Célimène. And maybe because he has such ideals and because he thinks so negatively of other people, that also means that he thinks too highly of himself. And that means that he's not going to be critical. He's not going to be self-critical. Or if he is self-critical, then yeah, he's going to be really self-critical, and then there's no hope for him because he's this miserable human being with no virtue whatsoever. And that's just too much. Like, that's just too much. At a certain point, you're going to have to wear your illusions, like, to a certain degree. And it's hard. It's hard because where do you draw the line? Maybe it has to do with your intentions. If your intentions are being compassionate versus your intentions are ruining other people's lives. But also, what if your intentions are hiding evil and, like, just kind of making people get along to get along? I feel like this is currently a really important issue. What happens when you acknowledge that there are injustices when there are injustices, when you're seeing those justices, and then you don't go and address them because you don't want to rock the boat. Then you should have spoken up, and you didn't. So now, it sounds very, very relevant. I was reading and I was thinking the whole time, this is what we're talking about right now in the United States with, a corrupt justice system. And people also seeing things, like seeing people abusing their power. They're seeing racism, and they're not saying anything because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make things worse. They don't want to, maybe they benefit from it. And, that makes us complicit. I think that's the thing. It's like, at a certain point, you have to speak up. And when you don't speak up, when you don't say it as it is, then you're at fault. I mean, it's one thing for Philinte to praise Oran's poem and say, oh, this poem is so great. Because, it's one thing for Philinte to say that, because it's like, the stakes aren't that high. Okay, like, Oran lives in his delusional world and his poem is actually good. But, if you're lying about something that has huge stakes, where the stakes are really high, then it's not okay. There's a lot that's going on. That's why the media cannot be trusted. I think what I have found really helpful, though, is kind of the use of, like, sharing videos, video footage, and, just having so many different... I guess what social media has tried to do is bring accountability, right? And on social media, like on Twitter, we see both. We see both this attempt at trying to bring accountability to a situation and saying, like, not speaking means that you are speaking. When you don't say something, you have chosen a side. And, it's really important that you choose the right side and that you acknowledge that these evils are there. And so you have really disturbing video footage of, violence. And, I think it's very important. So that's, the good side of what social media can do. And the bad side, though, is how, people can be very nasty and drag people for things that maybe aren't as serious. Sometimes they think that our outrage towards, say something like police brutality is equal to the outrage that we have towards some booktuber who said something stupid. And I mean, really, I think that sometimes it's like that. It's like it's good and it's not good at the same time. You get the loudest voices on social media. Yeah, I mean, you do, ultimately. You do get the loudest voices. I have seen things where, obviously everyone who starts out on social media, not everybody, if you're an actress or like a government leader or something, then you already have a reputation. But someone like myself, like let's say I became viral on Twitter. Like obviously I started out not being viral. Nobody knew who I was. Suddenly I created this reputation of people who really listen to me. And let's say at first, it's like, okay, so I'm saying these things. Maybe they're like really profound or really getting at something. And everybody becomes my followers. And then suddenly you get stan culture, right? Now in stan culture, no matter what I say, no one's going to criticize me. I am beyond criticism. I am untouchable. And that is a thing that is so dangerous because, now it's like nothing, I can't be touched. And then on the other hand, you have somebody who says something that is really stupid. And then, then they get dragged. And then there's like no redemption for these people. And it's again, it's very polar. But I'm the most concerned, honestly, about, fame and how fame creates communities of people who will support the person no matter what they say, which then shows how much power they have. Trip. I think social media on the whole is bad because it seems geared towards negativity. If you look at protests in the 60s, they also offered an alternative and a positive vision. Yeah, I mean, I didn't live in the 60s, and so I really don't know. What I do know about the protests is that the civil rights activists, for example, were very involved with the media and trying to get the media to show exactly what was going on. I think that's a point that's like important, is that protest does work with the media to kind of make people aware of something that they weren't aware of before, or they were and they just didn't really care because it wasn't immediate, and now it's suddenly immediate. But everybody, anybody is nobody's beyond criticism. And I feel this too when I'm on YouTube, because I make videos about books, and I do know that people tend to come across my videos when they're like studying for an exam. And I know that I'm fine with that. I don't think I ever say anything that you couldn't find online elsewhere. So, it's fine. But I wonder, does that mean that I have the final word? Like, most people came and found my channel through my video on Plato's Symposium. And, I think it's a fine video, but like, what if I just, and I don't have a lot of subscribers, right? But if I had like a few 100,000 or a few million subscribers, I would never have a few million subscribers over like obscure literature like this. But if you had millions of subscribers, it's like suddenly it's like this person can't do any wrong. Or it takes a lot for people to criticize someone in power. And the time, for me, the sort of the sign that a person has a lot of power is how long it takes before someone says, oh wait, we have a problem. Right? It's like the emperor's new clothes. That's another fable, right? The emperor who is basically in his birthday suit, and everybody's flattering him. It's like, oh, you're so great. You just look so beautiful, and you look so wonderful. And the child is like, you're naked. Right? And it's like, yeah, the emperor's naked. But nobody wants to say that because he's the emperor. Like, nobody wants to rock the boat. They benefit from him. I mean, it seems like he employed a bunch of people without them having to do a lot of work. Like, let me tell you. I mean, if that's all you got to do is pretend that you're making clothing and you can make the same amount of money, I don't know. But yeah, I find this play really interesting for, thinking about masks and wearing masks. And of course, the quote that I mentioned at the end of last week's video from Erasmus always comes to mind. It's Erasmus of Rotterdam, 16th century philosopher, he's a humanist, okay? He was a humanist. And Erasmus wrote Praise of Folly, and Praise of Folly is a satire. And folly is speaking, and folly basically suggests that, He says, nothing is so foolish as mistimed wisdom, and nothing less sensible than misplaced sense. And I think that it seems to me that Alceste has misplaced sense, right? Like, he says things as they are, but like they're not appropriate. Okay, he doesn't think about the context in which he says them. He doesn't care about how people will respond to what he says. He's not doing it out of this sense of compassion, but out of the sense of righteousness. Like, look at me, I'm going to tell you that you suck. And he says, a man's conduct is misplaced if he doesn't adapt himself to things as they are, has no eye for the main chance, won't even remember that convivial maxim, drink and depart, and asks for the play to stop being a play. On the other hand, it's a true sign of prudence not to want wisdom, which extends beyond your share as an ordinary mortal, to be willing to overlook things along with the rest of the world, and wear your illusions with a good grace. People say that this is really a sign of folly, and I'm not setting out to deny it, so long as they'll admit on their side that this is the way to play the comedy of life. Now, of course, this is Folly who's speaking, but I think there's something to this, that we're all kind of living in this illusion, and that also we can't just call out everything. I think, too, I couldn't sleep at night if I had, like Socrates. How so? Are you saying that Folly is like Socrates? Or that Alceste is like Socrates? I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. But that there is a certain, I'm just, if everything that happened, if everything people thought was just laid bare before us, I don't think we could really live. Like, I don't think I could really live. And at all times, I was made 100% aware of every evil ever. I don't think I could live. There's a certain sense in which even the body is like biologically structured to forget things, right? Forgetting, the act of forgetting is actually like a grace, because otherwise you would always remember every horrible trauma, every horrible anything that has ever happened in anywhere. And you couldn't really be able to move, it'd be really hard to move forward. There is a sense in which even like biologically humans are structured to dissimulate information, to forget. And I think that seems to me to be kind of one of the things that Molière was getting at in this play. But also this quote by Erasmus is like one of my favorite quotes of all time. And it's been 2 weeks in a row I've talked about it, so I think it's amazing, and it really makes me think. There's also the world is a stage and all the men and women merely players in it, right? Like As You Like It by Shakespeare. Like that we get caught up in the play and think we know more than we really do. Oh, yeah. Or we pretend that we're not in the play. Like everybody else is in the play, but I am standing outside of the play. But actually we're in the play as well. Or yeah, we're not really seeing the whole structure. So it's like both sides. It's like either I think I'm outside of the play looking in, and I'm not somehow involved in this costume ball, or I'm in the play and I don't even realize I'm in a play. So I think that this is just things as they are, and so now I am just ignorant of like the reality of what's going on, and we have to find somewhere in between. I feel like that we have to find somewhere in between, and think about how serious the issue is that we're dealing with. This is the reason why when it comes to reviewing self-published books, especially because self-published authors, they don't get very many reviews as it is, I'm not going to give them a negative review. If I like the book, I will review it. If I don't like the book, I will not review it. And that's just how it is. And I mean, maybe I should. Maybe I should just spill the tea and make a rant video about it. And that's a choice. But I also just I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, sometimes not saying something is okay. So that's my thoughts about this play. I really had a great time with you all. We all conspire with each other to pretend we know what's going on. Yeah. Well, yeah, sometimes it is a blindly in the blind kind of situation. That's why I think it's important that we get out of our communities and out of like that we get voices from elsewhere, from outside of our little world, our echo chambers. What's the next book? Well, this is interesting. So in May we were reading Molière because I thought, well, Molière May, they both they go together. They start with the same letter. I have never actually done a read along before on here that has really worked this way. This is actually my first time that I ever did these live streams, and I really enjoy it. I find that I can engage with people. Like, my word for 2020 was community, and I feel like I've really gotten more into like the booktube community by doing this. So what I was thinking of doing, I wasn't really thinking of doing any kind of read along in June, although I do want to continue doing the live streams. So what I would suggest is that the book that I think that maybe people might actually be interested in is Notre Dame de Paris, The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo, because I do have to read this book, and I have never read anything by Victor Hugo, and I need to fix that. And unfortunately, the only version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame that I know is the Disney version, which, I mean, is great, right? Like, the art, it's beautiful, but I'm also aware it's Disney, so the story is going to be entirely different. And so I thought, I would put that out there. If any of you are interested in Notre Dame de Paris, in June, I will be doing my live streams on Sunday discussing Notre Dame de Paris. And actually, let me go and get the book. How long is it? That's a good question. Let me go get the book. It is a monstrosity. It is this is my French version. It is 600. It's basically like almost 700 pages. 670 pages. So it might take more than a month. I don't want to like it's huge. There are other books we can do that are shorter. I was thinking of doing actually something by like a Haitian author, or like an author who is from a former French colony, because I think it's important. And we could do something about racial justice, in which case we could do Aimé Césaire. And I've read 2 things by Aimé Césaire, both of which I loved. One of them is actually my favorite book so far, but I don't know if he's translated into English. He's the founding father of a movement that's called Negritude, which was in the Francophone Caribbean, and it was a way of trying to it's a way of like bringing like making black, like, vindicate, I don't know how to put it, but like that being black is beautiful, basically. Like, it's a way of trying to bring dignity to assert the dignity of Black people. We could do that. I think we should do, I do think we should do something racial justice oriented, but I want to do something that's French. Let's see. I already read Frantz Fanon, but I know that Frantz Fanon, let's see. Frantz Fanon, he wrote The Wretched of the Earth, which is about colonization. That was published in 1963. So Frantz Fanon is most famous for his book Black Skin, White Masks, which, well, it deals with the theme of masks. So there's that. I'm not sure yet. Actually, I will make a video about that because I'm not sure what I want to do for June. I definitely will be reading Notre Dame de Paris in June, but whether the live streams will be about that, I'm not sure. I do really want to focus, other than the books I have to read for my PhD exam, I do want to in June focus on books about racial justice. And that is something that I'm personally focusing on. I have Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. We could do Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. It is not French or Francophone, but it does deal with racial justice, which is ultimately French and Francophone. Like, you know, it's post-colonial, so it's going to deal with it. But this deals with the justice system in the United States. It's by a defense attorney who represented an innocent man on death row, and it's about kind of what that looked like. So we could do that too, but I'm not sure. I haven't chosen yet. So if anybody else has other ideas, it doesn't have to be French, like French language book. But I was thinking of doing something that wasn't France. I feel like I focus so much on France that we don't focus on like Haiti, for example. If you have any other ideas, let me know. There is a biography on Toussaint Louverture, I think, that would be great to read. And that one is in English. And I saw it and I added it on Goodreads and I can't find it now. I think I might do that because I'm trying to remember my books. I have like 700 something books on my Goodreads page. Yeah, that's what it's called. It's called Toussaint Louverture, A Revolutionary Life. It's by Philippe Girard. Yeah. I think we should do that. So Toussaint Louverture was he was born a slave, and he's basically like, so Haiti was the first country to gain its independence from these empires. And it was led by an enslaved person, Toussaint Louverture. And he led a slave revolt. And that is how Haiti was born. And there's this book, it's called Toussaint Louverture, A Revolutionary Life. And it's published by Basic Books, so it should be pretty easy to find online. It's a pretty, I think, a generic, I say generic, but like a traditional publisher. Let me see how expensive it is, but I think I want to do that. Yeah, they have it. Well, so yeah, the hardcover is $30, the Kindle is $20. This is on Amazon. I'm just looking at prices. Of course, everything is now like Kindle. Kindle is like $20, but you could probably find it in the library. I think we'll do that. I'm now really interested in that, but I will make a video about it. So yeah, if at any point any of you watching have ideas, put them in the comments, because I do want to continue these live streams, but I want to read whatever it is that interests you. I know that June is also Pride Month, so yeah. Lots of French names for me. Yeah, I will actually, so I will mention the book by Toussaint Louverture, or by Philippe Girard in the comments as my kind of pick, but it's not definitive. So if other people have other options, you can go with it. But I'm thinking of something that has to do either with race or has to do with like sexuality, because June. So I'm really wanting to focus on race still, because my channel is really only focusing on France, and so I really need to bring the Francophone part out more. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming today and for participating in whatever ways you have, even just viewing the videos. I am super grateful, and it has been a lot of fun. So I hope you have a great week, and that you stay safe. Thank you, everybody. It is. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is more than a bit long. We could do it in 2 months. We don't have to do it in 1 month. So that is also an option. All right. Bye.